begin with breaking news from Buffalo, New York. That is where Congressman Chris Collins is expected to speak any minute now about his arrest today. Collins, of course, was the first member of Congress who actually endorsed Donald Trump for president back in 2016. He also then served as the congressional liaison to the Trump transition team. He is now facing charges of insider trading and lying to the FBI in an indictment that totaled 30 pages, the government alleging that Collins tipped his son off about a failed drug test at a biotech company, Innate Immunotherapeutics, where the congressman served on the board of directors. Family and friends then sold their stock in the company before the news broke, saving them more than $768,000 in losses. This morning, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York noted that no one is above the law as he laid out the charges against the congressman.
Congressman Collins cheated our markets and our justice system. These charges are a reminder that this is a nation of laws and that everybody stands equal before the bar of justice.
Now, Collins has pleaded not guilty to the charges. In a statement, his lawyer said, quote, "We are confident he will be completely vindicated and exonerated." In the meantime, House Speaker Paul Ryan called for a prompt and thorough investigation, said Collins will no longer be serving on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. According to the indictment, Collins was actually on White House grounds at a congressional picnic when he received word about that failed drug test. For more on all of this, I am joined by Laura Namias, New York political reporter for Politico, Paul Butler, a former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst, and Jason Johnson, politics editor for TheRoot.com. Laura, just the backstory here in terms of the basics of what's being alleged. This is sort of an insider trading deal here. It seemed to come out of nowhere today. Was there any hint that something like this was coming?
Absolutely. The congressman had actually been under investigation by the Office of Congressional Ethics for a while now. We didn't know that federal prosecutors were looking at this, and they wouldn't say exactly how the case was referred to them or how they picked it up. But the news about his stock trades and the news about his making recommendations to other members of Congress to buy stock in this company, of which he was a member of the board, has been public for more than a year.
What does this case look like to you, Paul, as a prosecutor, taking a look at this? What does it look like the government's put together here? It
looks like a slam dunk. So this is a 30-page indictment that says that this man is on the board and the largest shareholder in this pharmaceutical company. He gets this bad news that its main product, the trials haven't gone well. Basically, the company is going to go out of business. And so dudes at the White House, he calls his son 7 times saying, sell the stock, when he finally gets in touch with the son. Apparently, because the son does sell the stock, his other friends, comrades also sell their stock before the news is public. Again, they save $700,000. This is a classic what you don't do if you have insider information. You're not allowed to use it to benefit your boys.
We are waiting, as we said, we are expecting to hear from the congressman, Chris Collins. We are expecting to hear from him out in Buffalo, New York, any minute now. You're looking at the podium there. It's all set up. This thing has already been delayed a little bit from what was planned. So we're going to see what he has to say, what kind of statement he puts together. Again, his lawyer out there saying he's going to be vindicated. He enters the plea of not guilty. I want to ask you this, Paul, though. He's got an office. He's a member of Congress. Is this a situation, is that a potential bargaining chip with prosecutors for somebody in his position? Is there a situation here? Has this happened where basically there's an agreement to give up the seat, to give up the office in exchange for leniency of some sort?
You know, it's a bargaining chip if you actually have something that the prosecutor wants. So this guy is up for re-election in November. So that's significant in part because the prosecutor is bringing the case now, probably because the Justice Department has this 60-day rule, 100-day rule. You don't bring charges within that length of an indictment because it might affect the election. So President Trump's got to be keeping his eye on this. Ought to also be concerned about the U.S. attorney, same U.S. attorney who's investigating Michael Cohen. U.S. attorney says today, if you're a high official and you abuse the public trust, We take that very seriously. Again, not good news for President Trump.
Yeah, and Jason, I mean, the name Chris Collins, I think if you're a close political watcher, somebody watching this network, you've certainly seen him over the last couple of years. First Republican to endorse Donald Trump, first Republican member of Congress who did that back in 2016, had that role with the transition. So there is certainly some prominence there. I think a lot more people learning about him tonight for the first time. But in terms of the midterms, we are just a couple months away. Democrats are running on this message of, it's time to sort of clean house there in the House. Does this factor into what Democrats are trying to say in terms of a message this November?
Definitely, Steve. This is the worst unforced error possible. I mean, I always thought that the only thing that could stop the Democrat success this fall would be a party-wide scandal. Individual members of Congress can get in trouble all the time. It doesn't necessarily matter. That becomes a local issue. But Collins is not only caught for being sort of a swamp creature and using insider trading to make himself rich, he's connected to Trump, and he told several other members. So in the process of this investigation, this may connect to 4, 5, 6, 7 other members of Congress that he may have delivered this information to. It could take all of them out. And this is a sort of party-wide scandal that is going to have an impact this fall. This is just manna from heaven for the Democrats right now. And Republicans need to be really concerned. And many of them are probably calling their broker right now.
Well, it is interesting, too. If you think back, the last time Democrats picked up the House from Republicans in 2006, one of the issues that powered them that year, there were a series of corruption scandals, right. Many of them about Republican members of Congress there. The Democrats certainly harnessed that year. As Laura was saying a minute ago, this not the first time Collins' trading practices have been reported on. In January of last year, Jake Sherman from Politico wrote, overheard in the Capitol, New York Representative Chris Collins talking loudly into a phone just off the House floor, bragging about how many millionaires I've made in Buffalo in the last month. He was bragging about a stock tip he had shared with people. I mean, the word that was used here at this press conference, Paul, was brazen. We're hearing about the White House picnic. We're hearing about just off the House floor. All of this stuff is going on within the earshot of some pretty powerful, influential people.
We're hearing about a high-level politician, the people's representative, who apparently believes he's above the law. He's hiding in plain sight. He's flagrantly violating the law and apparently believes he's not going to get caught. Well, today he got his comeuppance.
Tell us, Laura, about his reputation. Before all of this today, his reputation as a politician. Buffalo area, Western New York, we say first Trump supporter. The district he's from is one of those districts that really swung toward Trump in 2016. Chris Collins, the politician, what's his reputation there?
Well, the district was redrawn in 2012, and it was made more conservative. And he's reasonably well liked up in his own district. But I'll tell you who doesn't like him is Governor Andrew Cuomo, the Democratic governor of New York. Chris Collins was rumored to be considering a run for governor in the past couple of cycles. The governor and Chris Collins have gotten into fights over Medicaid funding. So that's one person who I think is happy to see the news today, or at least plotting something in response.
And Collins' arrest could also, we talk about the political implications here. Another way it could play into the hands of Democrats heading into November is political rights. Democrats have tried to find ways to paint House Republicans as the creatures of the Washington swamp. There's that term again, corrupt political figures who are taking advantage of their station in public life. Democrats seem to be getting handed that theme on a silver platter. Jason, you were just talking about that. The other thing to look at here, though, look, we just were talking last night about this special election out in Ohio where it is still officially too close to call. Not sure the Democrats are actually going to pick that one up right now, but Democrats trying to chip away at that number of 23 seats. If they do, they get the majority. Here's a district that was on nobody's radar in terms of being competitive this November. I think Trump won this thing by 24 points in 2016. One of the reasons we're interested in this press conference right now is Collins about to come out there and say, hey, folks, I'm fighting the charges and I'm running for re-election. I'm staying on the ballot and I'm staying in this race. Because even given how Republican that district is, we have seen politicians get jammed up like this and lose in districts they otherwise would never lose in.
Oh, definitely. This is the kind of last-minute scandal that ends up waking up the opposition. Whatever the Democrat is like, wait a minute, here's my chance. And if he decides to fight it, here's what the problem is, Steve. This becomes part of the overall noise about this administration. You've got Manafort. You've got his assistants. You've got all of these people. You've got 3 or 4 guys running a cabal, running the VA. All of this sounds like just sort of politicians gone wild in Washington, D.C., and this is not the kind of thing that Republicans need to be battling as they're they're also trying to keep their messages separate from Trump. This has the potential to be as big as the House banking scandal, which pretty much cost the Democrats the House in the early 90s. If this spreads, if you've got several people coming forward and saying, well, I kind of got information from him, but I didn't make that much money, this has the opportunity to drag down several Republicans, regardless of what the Democratic candidates are that they're going to be facing this fall.
Well, yeah, Paul, it is that sort of cryptic specter there of other members of Congress. You look at this indictment today, you look at what you heard from the prosecutors. What is the metastatic potential of this in terms of other members being brought in?
And so Collins himself apparently has no defense. What his lawyers have said so far is, well, he didn't actually make any money from this insider information. Yes, his son did. Yes, his future son-in-law did. Or actually his fiance's father made money, but not him. That's not a legal defense. And so the prosecutor will be interested in what he knows, what Collins knows about other Congress people, if he tipped them off and if they illegally benefited from this information. And of course, long shot, but if he knows anything about President Trump, he was the first congressperson to endorse him, we can expect Trump to pull what we could call a Papadopoulos or a Manafort, meaning Trump will go, Congressman Collins, who? He was my coffee boy. I barely know him. But if that's not true, if Collins has got any goods on the president, again, that's a stretch, but if he does, that's bargaining power for Collins.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.